Like, I think especially if you enjoy anything in any form, there's going to be some level of problematicness. That's not a word, but we'll roll with it. In people that you deal with, it's almost like the separating the art from the artist. Like there's tons of music artists that we all like that have said or done terrible things, but it's up to you as the consumer whether or not you want to like okay that as far as your ears or your palate.
Let me put you on game.
Let's talk DaBaby. And
Baby on baby.
Baby Jesus has had a lot going on the last couple of weeks. We had a packed show last week, so we weren't able to jam that in there, but there's been more developments, so we can probably talk about those. If you're not familiar with the DaBaby situation, he was at Rolling Loud, I believe in Chicago, and he was interacting with his fans. And in the call and response, he asked the fans to throw their lighters up if they didn't have HIV/AIDS and weren't going to die in 2 to 3 weeks. And he also asked them to throw their lighters up if they weren't performing, let's say, illicit acts outside of his show. And he was alluding on male illicit acts. And in that same show, he also brought out Tory Lanez in a costume to perform. And that's notable because of Tory Lanez's current standing within music due to his alleged violence against Megan Thee Stallion. And DaBaby set was also directly after Megan Thee Stallion's set at Rolling Loud. So that's interesting. He faced a great deal of backlash due to basically everything that he did, including actual physical backlash. Somebody threw a shoe at that man. And he issued what many would consider a half apology by basically saying that he wasn't referring to the whole gay community and that his gay fans have class. And after that, he was eventually replaced in the Lollapalooza lineup with Young Thug. And he posted on his Instagram in a since deleted apology that he wanted to apologize to the LGBTQ plus community for the hurtful and triggering comments that he made. And he wanted to also apologize for his misinformed comments about HIV/AIDS. And he also said that he wants artists to be given the space to learn and to grow, like he says that he's going to do. So I wanted to kind of walk through this conversation and ask, what were your initial reactions to his comments?
It's interesting because you don't quite see rappers getting recorded too much for what they say during performances. You know, it's one thing to take a rapper to task to what they say on their tracks, which is wild in a lot of different ways. Rappers say some wild, wild stuff. And so it's the first time in recent memory to me where a rapper's being brought to task are potentially being canceled as a result of it. You know, I remember Eminem back in the days and all the wild stuff that he used to say, whether it's about the Columbine or Bill Clinton or, you know, violence against women and his ex and his baby mom and just a lot of wild stuff that he said. And the rap has a history of just guys who are hyper masculine, that talk about masculinity in a way that's kind of narrow-minded in some form or fashion, and just get away with saying some of the craziest things that can be uttered. Other genres like heavy metal do similar things, but there's a way in which it's celebrated in rap that we don't really see it in other genres of music and in other art forms. And it's been something that has bothered a lot of critics, you know, conservative people, but it's fascinating now to see that the LGBT community, as well as the whole cancel culture ethos that's around now, is bringing DaBaby to task. And he's, you know, the latest person on the hit list of people that should be brought to task for and held accountable for the things that they say. How about you?
I definitely agree. I think I echo those sentiments that about rap music and about his comments in general. I think they were offensive, but also, which is nothing new. I mean, people saying offensive things, but for me, it also just kind of felt unnecessary. because sometimes people will say offensive things in response to a question, but he said something offensive in response to like nothing. Like it just kind of seemed like it just came out of nowhere. So of course, like what he said was incredibly damaging to, and people have uh noted this in their backlash. It's incredibly damaging to suggest that people are still dying from HIV/AIDS in that way in developed countries. And also, it's incredibly damaging to suggest that HIV contraction comes from promiscuity when that's certainly not always the case. Like the case is that it's gotten to the point where people are almost undetectable or are undetectable in a lot of cases. They're not able to transmit it to other people, and they're able to live normal lives outside of having to take medication for it. And then also some of these people have gotten HIV/AIDS from various different like methods, whether it's just they were drug users in the past, or like they got it from a cheating partner or something like that. You know, it's so nuanced. He took a nuanced conversation and he turned it into something that was very crude, you know?
Yeah.
And it also kind of just seemed like from a business perspective, like it just seemed stupid, to be honest. Like if rappers are very famously about their money and about getting them checks, but like that is you saying that kind of stuff is in direct conflict with you actually making money in this current climate. Like if you're about getting the most money that you can possibly get, providing for your family, creating a future, building a business, like that's literally flying in the face of doing that by saying something like that. So even if you say or you believe something like that, plenty of people say and believe those things. But when you have the platform that you have, like you have to be wary of what you say and how easily viewable it is to people that want to dissect it. So it just seemed like it was just he was moving backwards in terms of like he was hustling backwards, I should say, in terms of his business decisions, which directly kind of segues into our next prompt. Like, how do you feel about the backlash and the loss of sponsorships in response to his statements?
In terms of the backlash that he's receiving, it seems to be consistent with precedent that has been set with how cancel culture works in a way. For all the ills that cancel culture has, what it's trying to do at the very least is just bring awareness to people that act up or say things that are kind of wild and out of pocket. Sometimes it's a bit of an overreach, but other times it's bringing people to task that should kind of be brought to task. What DaBaby said was ignorant on several different levels, right? And there are some people who are saying, oh, it's just people being sensitive. But at the same time, if there wasn't this huge outcry, would what he said have just been ignored and just accepted as, oh, that's okay? Or if there wasn't such a huge outcry, things would have just went on kind of business as usual. So in a sense, I kind of understand where people are coming from in their complaints. And then ultimately, the sponsorship aspect, it's just brands who say, hey, I don't want to be associated with this brand at the moment. At the end of the day, as a public figure, you are a brand. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be paid for the contracts that you are paid with. But a lot of times those contracts have stipulations in them that allow a sponsor to back out because they just don't want to be associated with negative press. That's what it all comes down to. It's people advertising and trying to get their product out, and they don't want to be seen or associated with someone who just says some wild stuff and doesn't seem as remorseful as you'd like him to be in some ways.
So I wanted to talk about something else in relation to DaBaby. He halfway apologized, as we discussed earlier, with his comments about his gay fans having class. And I think that we've seen a lot of scenarios where people will say something and they will apologize for what they said or what they did, depending on the severity of it, of course. And they won't be given any kind of forgiveness and they'll kind of be stuck in the same place. With DaBaby, like I think he's exempt because I don't think his apology was in any way genuine. Like I think, especially considering the fact that he deleted his basically PR team's apology off of his Instagram. But I wanted to discuss like artists and other people, celebrities essentially, and whether or not they should or are given the room to grow.
I think you said it best. I think and you hinted at where my feelings lie. I think that they should be given the room to grow. It is up to, because they are role models and because they are idolized, the margin of error is very small. And the amount of patience that people are going to have to deal with the mistakes that they make on these public platforms is very low. But at the same time, they are humans just like the rest of us. You know, I saw a video clip of Justin Bieber in his house going home and having fans waiting for him at his house. And he was just talking to one of the girls like, hey, I can't hug you. Like, you're in front of my home. I'm trying to come home to like some sense of peace.
Yeah.
And I can't reward this negative behavior, just to highlight the immense amount of attention and pressure that they get from all sources. But to just go back to the original question, yeah, I think that they should be given time to learn, as long as they're doing it in a empathetic and a conscious way, and not just trying to appease people and behave correctly, quote unquote, in order to stop the backlash and to stop the firestorm that they're dealing with. As long as they're being genuine, as long as they're actually trying to educate themselves and be better, like we all are on a regular basis, I'm all for it. And I'm also for people choosing to associate with them whether or not they like their actions. At the end of the day, it's everybody's choice what they will tolerate. And I can't make that decision for other people, and nor should anyone else. So, you know, freedom of association is something that I believe in. So I might not mess with someone who says some wild stuff, but maybe someone else will, and that's their prerogative.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially if you enjoy anything in any form, there's going to be some level of problematicness. That's not a word, but we'll roll with it. In people that you deal with, it's almost like the separating the art from the artist. Like, there's tons of music artists that we all like that have said or done terrible things, but it's up to you as the consumer whether or not you want to like okay that as far as your ears or your palate. um but I do think we need to give these people room to grow, like you said, if they're willing to. Like, if you look at somebody like DaBaby, like, he doesn't necessarily seem at this point to be ready to or willing to change or to grow. It just kind of seems like he's trying to stop the bleeding as far as losing money, at
Yeah.
least from the outside looking in. uh but I think that you also see like someone like Kobe, who allegedly did something heinous, and it is up to you whether or not you want to choose to forgive or to forget that, or how you want to see that in a certain light, or if you want to look at what he said afterwards and say like, okay, I could understand that, or I can empathize with that, or not. Or if you just say like, I'm cool on him or his legacy, like, that's perfectly understandable. But it is a very nuanced conversation, and I'm glad that we were able to talk about it.